Welcome to the Brainstorm with Sparks and Finn, a podcast where we brainstorm the science and philosophy of a new age, an electric universe age, and what it means for the human race, past, present, and future. I'm Finn, sci-fi author, artist, and a guy who so desperately wanted to believe in the Lighthouse of Alexandria, blasting the crap out of suckers who pulled into the wrong dock.
And I'm Sparks, physicist, experimentalist, and hypersonic jump rope enthusiast.
This week, we've got the author of The Land of Chen, Lord of Hidden Knowledge, and the cruel tyrant who dropped a chandelier on my dreams of Egyptian death rays, then rode the rope up, cackling at my ruin.
Oh my god.
The one, the only, Geoffrey Drumm! Yeah! Today's springboard topic, Mr. Drumm has solved the pyramids. Yep, this is it, folks. Science is over, and Geoffrey wins first prize.
First prize!
Now buckle up and let's see where this goes.
Here just for another minute or so.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw your wife poke her head in back there. If she wants to come in and say hi, she's more than welcome. Hi.
Yeah, she's back in her little office area over there as well. Yeah, my wife Alexa. I'll give you a shout out. Yeah, she has her own YouTube channel that she does, and she's working on a video for that right now.
What does she do?
So I mean, we're both independently employed, and we both just so I'm an author. I do my YouTube channel, and so she also has her YouTube channel as well.
Oh, nice. Similar content.
Yeah, so mine is focused on my theory and the research behind it, and we also do on-site exploration content every week. And she goes out and she does kind of the same thing as filming at all of the exclusive sites that we've been very fortunate to get access to.
Wow.
So hers like an adventure, travel, exploration channel.
How's that been getting access to things? I hear it can be difficult.
It's actually quite the opposite. It's super easy.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah, so we have great contacts. Despite what people may think, we have been welcomed with open arms from all of our colleagues at the Ministry of Antiquities and all of our Egyptian friends and everybody that works in the tourism industry here. And for the most part, the majority of stuff is private, publicly accessible.
Yeah.
But they have a thing here in Egypt called a special permission. And basically you can get this through any sort of tour company. I mean, it costs some money. And typically I do these with my tours when they come through. We'll split the cost of the special permission access between the tour group. So it's a lot more affordable per person. And we have a huge tour coming up in November where we'll get private access into all three chambers of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And we do it at night from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. So you get to go on the Giza Plateau at night and go inside the Great Pyramid at night.
Oh, wow.
Which is really cool.
That is.
And we've been in I guess the most remarkable one that nobody's been in the past 10 years. I think the last time somebody went in there was 2013, and we went in 2023. The Pyramid of Userkaf. We got a special permission to go into the Pyramid of Userkaf. I've been in the Osiris Shaft, the Osirion, private entry into the Great Pyramid, private entry into Abu Sir and Abu Ghraib. And I mean, you name it, I've pretty much done the whole gamut of structures here in Egypt.
Have you seen
And we just got back from any UFOs.
Yeah.
I've never seen one. I'm still waiting for one to land in my front yard.
So why don't we run through kind of your presentation? We'll minimally bother you, and then we'll ask a bunch of questions and see where the conversation goes after that.
Well, so let's do it the opposite way. I'm curious.
Okay.
From people that are in the field and in the know, and colleagues with all of the people at the Thunderbolts project who I've always held the project and the concept in the highest esteem. And Ben and I were talking about the video that Andrew Hall made recognizing my work. And it was the biggest single piece of support that I've received from somebody with not only academic, but also professional qualifications since I started doing this line of research in 2017. So my first research trip here, I was a wide-eyed neophyte, and through a random series of events, I had finally ended up in a career path where I could finally afford my first trip to Egypt.
Mhm.
And so I came here being familiar with the general hypotheses that have been presented on the Great Pyramid of Giza, which all of them focus exclusively on the function of the Great Pyramid, as if all of the other pyramid structures and temples and sites were just completely irrelevant or non-functional structures, which to me is a huge deficiency in the sort of alternative concept about the function of the Egyptian pyramids. If you have a hypothesis that is correct, it should be able to comprehensively address the function of all the structures under the same umbrella, utilizing the same mechanisms of operation, physics, chemistry, whatever the theory is. It should be able to address all of them equitably.
Absolutely.
So
Exactly right.
I was super familiar with a couple of different hypotheses that talked about the function of the Great Pyramid as related to the production of electricity, utilizing various mechanisms of operation to accomplish this end goal.
Mhm.
So I was like, all right, well, I got to see it for myself. So I came to Egypt, and I remember the first artifact that I discovered was during a private access to a site called Abu Sir. There's a red granite channel conduit system that connects into a system of red quartzite collection bowls. And to me, this wasn't indicative at all about producing electricity, but rather aqueous chemicals, aqueous solutions, some sort of liquid mixture that was being produced in the adjacent temple site, or perhaps within the pyramid itself, and then being collected in these red quartzite bowls. And these things are very, very elaborate, though they are meticulously executed, huge collection basins. And the conventional explanation for this is that they're for water drainage and water collection, which is super counterintuitive to the entire system of the pyramids. Because again, you're not necessarily collecting water drainage off the side of a cemetery. And these channels aren't even exposed to the open air. They're completely enclosed underneath a paving of black basalt. And, fast forward 5 years, I started to discover that black basalt is a material that we still use today for thermal insulation and heat storage properties, which is the exact same way that they were utilizing that material in the ancient time. And there's almost a color coding system regarding the three major types of stones that are utilized within the Egyptian pyramids: white limestone being a dielectric, black basalt being a material for thermal insulation and heat storage, and red granite being indicative of quartz-containing material for the production of ultrasound via a mechanism called the inverse piezoelectric property. So a lot of people talk about how this red granite is producing electricity through the piezoelectric property. My hypothesis is actually the complete opposite, where electric fields induce the inverse piezoelectric property to produce ultrasound. And that's specifically related to the function of the Great Pyramid and the production of a dilute solution of sulfuric acid. So we were talking earlier, kind of in our preface conversation, about the function of the Giza pyramids. So my overall hypothesis is that the Egyptian pyramids are a series of industrial scale chemical reactors. And these facilities started with the function of the step pyramid, which was extracting bedrock methane. Then the red and bent pyramids of Dashur, which are converting that methane into an aqueous ammonia solution, and then into a solid fertilizer compound known as ammonium bicarbonate, or it may have been urea, depending on the complexity of the chemical reactions that were happening in the final synthesis chamber. And I've also proposed an alternative hypothesis for the function of the bent pyramid, that it may have also been converting that aqueous ammonia solution into nitric acid. Then we move on to the Giza Plateau with the Great Pyramid, Central Pyramid, and Final Pyramids, the three major pyramids of the Giza Plateau. A lot of people don't know there's actually 11 pyramids on the Giza Plateau, but the three major ones being the Great Pyramid, Central Pyramid, and Final Pyramid, for the production of dilute solutions of sulfuric acid and hydrochloric acid, respectively. And I haven't come out publicly with my hypothesis on the Final Pyramid but it's not an acid. It's actually the exact opposite. I'll give you a little teaser on that. And that's coming out in my second book, which I've been working on diligently, slowly, but surely. Got a lot going on recently.
You do have a lot going on.
I'm working on cranking out my second book. So my first book was entitled An Initiation into Ancient Chemistry Through the Degrees of the Egyptian Pyramids. And it was really the physics and chemistry 101 mechanisms of operation that drove these systems. And in the second book, I'm kind of pushing the envelope a little bit and introducing some new topics that are certainly no longer chemistry and physics 101. So it's been a lot of fun on this journey. And, you know, I've learned a lot since my first trip in 2017. And then, so 2017, 2018, I took the year off. 2019, I did a research trip to Ireland, as my first book also incorporates passage chamber structures like Newgrange that were utilized for the production of a chemical called ferrous sulfate, which is sort of ubiquitously useful and one of the first chemicals that was being studied by the alchemists of the medieval period, particularly useful as an agent to precipitate gold that has been dissolved in a solution of aqua regia. So you got to have a chemical to get that dissolved gold back out of there. And then ferrous sulfate is very useful for doing that. You can also use it to produce sulfuric acid and render metallic iron. So you can also take it as a supplement for iron as well. So it has medicinal properties and also agricultural properties for a soil conditioner. So it has a sort of ubiquitous applications for ferrous sulfate. And I propose that these passage chamber structures that we find across the world, not only in Ireland, all across Europe and the UK, but we also find the exact same structures in Japan. And like I was just saying, my wife and I just got back from a research expedition to Japan. We did a month in September, and we loved it so much that we decided to get a house down there. So we bought a beach house in Japan, went back for another 3 months, and I've been researching. So there's also stone circles all over Japan that are identical in configuration to the stone circles in Ireland and all across the UK, all built during the same Neolithic time period by a civilization called the Jomon people. And it's absolutely fascinating civilization that I can kind of touch on here in just a second, because they were making the pottery figures that are very, very indicative of the Venus figurines and the owl eyes that are produced in these plasma discharge formations that have been spoken about so much by Anthony Peratt and the team at the Thunderbolts Project. So I have a slide deck on that too. It's from one of my recent members only episodes. But so long story short, the whole hypothesis starts with the stone circle systems, which I believe were used to attract lightning. And this lightning is actually not utilized for the electricity itself, but rather for the production of atmospheric nitrate fertilizers. So when lightning strikes, it actually causes something called nitrogen fixation in the atmosphere, which produces water-soluble nitrates that are carried down to agricultural lands in the rain. And it appears that all of these ancient Neolithic civilizations had a fascination with lightning and these electrical discharge phenomenon, again, tying directly into the ideas of the Thunderbolts Project. And they certainly would have studied and had a keen interest in learning about the properties and the mechanisms and the after effects of these electrical discharge.
A few moments later.
Well, yeah, so I think we're cutting off. I was talking about how this prehistoric Neolithic civilization that existed in both the UK and also simultaneously in Japan, with fascination, keen interest, and a reverence for these electrical discharge phenomenon, specifically lightning. So we visited a site called Oshito Ishi Hill, which is a very mysterious structure in Japan that has circle-ish configuration, andesite at the top of this flattened hillside. And there's a big pillar stone right in the center. And the general consensus, this is a natural form of andesite stones, and that the volcanic tough side has gradually eroded, leaving andesite megaliths sticking out of the hill. And stones still radiate a powerful magnetic field today. And the researchers at Kumamoto University have determined that the magnetic field that's emanating from these andesite stones is a direct result of lightning strikes on the structure. And these stones are completely etched with scars and pockmarks that are all indicative of lightning discharge on these rocks. I've posed that this Neolithic civilization being natural formations like this, and we're paying attention to the after effects of these lightning and rain storms, which again, as I was mentioning, during these lightning discharges, it forms atmospheric nitrates, and that atmospheric nitrates are water soluble, and they're brought down with the rain for fertilization of agricultural areas. So I believe that this was the birth of these stone circle and standing stone menhir structures all across the world, is by witnessing these events and applying the knowledge that they had learned from the configuration of these natural formations. They began to design and implement the first stone circle structures, which we also saw all across Japan, were these rudimentary stone circles with these central standing stones. And they did this to bring lightning to specific agricultural areas for the fertilization of crops. So this was the birth and the dawn of these stone circle systems all across the globe, was by studying electrical discharge phenomenons and their effects, learning from these systems, and then implementing these natural forces into systems where they could systematically control the location of where this lightning was discharging.
This is Victor Schauberger's idea, where you observe nature and then copy it. That is exactly his idea. How big are the stone circles?
So they vary in size. Of course, the biggest one that I've ever visited is at Avebury in Wiltshire, UK, and it is an absolutely massive city stone circle complex. You also have kind of smaller ones, the size of Stonehenge, the Komakino stone circle in Aomori, Japan. You know, it's probably maybe 30 meters across with much, much smaller stones. So they vary in size and stone composition, but they all have the exact same alignments. The same knowledge has been encoded into these structures, whether they're in Japan, the UK, Ireland, wherever you find these stones. They're also found in sites like Nabta Playa, Egypt. So these stones are sort of ubiquitous across the globe, which to me begs the question, where was the connection between these civilizations? Because according to the conventional story, these are genetically independent civilizations that had no ability for intercontinental travel. So the fact that they were building these stone circle structures at the same time at different places in the globe implies either one or two things. One, a common point of origin, where civilization had a common birthplace, and then a diaspora across the globe into various areas, or they had the ability to travel intercontinentally, and they were in direct contact, sharing knowledge, construction technology, etc.
Wow, that there is so much to unpack there. That is fascinating. Sorry that we're killing our video. It's just that whenever it starts to lag, we've noticed that if we kill our video, it allows the lag to go away. So it's not like we're running away. It's not like we're disinterested. It's just a technical
it's all good. And I apologize for any connection deficiencies. This is Egyptian quality internet that I'm running on here. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. So
no worries. Well, I guess my big question is, this doesn't seem like the sorts of processes that a primitive culture would be engaging in. I mean, how are they studying lightning? Why would they think that lightning could enhance fertilization? So I'm a big believer in the ancient advanced civilization theories. So what's your thought? I mean, are we talking about pre-flood type civilizations, or do you think this was all developed within the regular scope of mainstream history? Last time you turned that light on in the Andy Hall presentation, I bronzed up your skin, made it orange, and put some Trump hair on you. That'll get us lots of fan mail.
Yeah, my wife actually came down during one of the episodes and said, "You look all washed out." Oh, I think he's back.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, so I asked that question, and right after that is when you cut out. So basically, just answer it again, I guess. I was asking about the age of civilization.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question, which actually brings me into the timeline of the Egyptian pyramids as well, which I don't think correspond to the dynastic Egyptian civilization either.
Whew.
So specifically regarding the Neolithic Joman civilization, the conventional date for them is 14,000 BCE until around 3000 BCE, with evidence that that civilization dates back as far as 30,000 BCE.
Wow.
So they existed not only during the last ice age, but also during the Younger Dryas transition into the period after.
Wonderful.
So this is a civilization that I believe was implementing much older knowledge in an attempt to revitalize and reinvigorate all of the areas that were devastated by this freezing and unfreezing flooding catastrophe. So they were building these systems with knowledge that existed before to bring the earth back to life. This also goes into concepts like electroculture, where the distribution of electric current into agricultural areas can be a very, very ubiquitously useful tool for stimulating agricultural growth. And when I say Neolithic, I certainly don't mean to imply that the Neolithic people were primitive in any way. We may have an unfortunate attribution of that characteristic to the civilization, but I think they had a lot more knowledge and sophistication than we conventionally give them credit for, specifically in regard to astronomy, alignments, the way the solar system works, the way our Earth works, and the forces of nature that are at work in basically everything that drives the way the Earth system works as a whole, specifically regarding the circulation of electricity and these connections between electrical phenomenon and agriculture. So as I was saying, they learned by studying nature and by seeing areas where lightning was striking, the rain would fall, and they would recognize that for some reason they may not have had the concept of actually the chemical reactions producing these atmospheric fertilizers, but I think they would have recognized that for some reason all of this area surrounding the lightning strike is vibrant and green and teeming with crops. And again, the conventional story would tell you that the Neolithic Jomen were both hunter-gatherer civilization and proto-domestic farming. So they were implementing both of these techniques to supply food for their civilization. So whether you're a hunter-gatherer or you're beginning domesticated agriculture, you would have recognized, hey, the areas where we get this food, for some reason, when this magic lightning god touches down from the sky, and a lot of these ancient structures, specifically in Japan, are directly connected to that nomenclature of the place where the gods touched down from earth, from the heaven to the earth. And I think this is directly indicative of lightning being deified by this ancient civilization. It would have been the most powerful force of nature that they could have witnessed. So there would have been reverence, awe, fear, but also keen interest in learning from the force of nature that was driving this phenomenon. So they say, hey, this stone circle is being zapped by lightning, and the agricultural areas around here the crops are really, really good whenever this flash of lightning comes from the sky. What if we take this natural configuration where this lightning happens and we make our own hillside with a flattened top, and we build a little stone circle over there? And that's exactly what the Japanese Jomen people did at a site called Komakino, where they literally leveled the side of a hill to create an artificial plateau, and they built a stone circle out of andesite stones, which also have an incredibly strong magnetic field surrounding the structure, which is again indicative of lightning discharges onto the structure. Again, strategically delivering these lightning and rainstorms to specific areas for agricultural purposes. Fast forward maybe a couple thousand years later, I believe that the Egyptian pyramids were operational during a time period called the African Humid Period, which is approximately 8500 BCE to around 5300 BCE, where there was significantly more rainfall in the upper eastern Sahara. And the Sahara was actually being directly terraformed by these rainstorms from a desert into an area with abundant agricultural areas. And this is also where we begin to see the domestication of cattle on a large scale. And I believe that these terraforming events that were happening in the upper eastern Sahara are also directly related to the operation of the red and bent pyramids in Dashur, for the production of fertilizers. You need soil conditioners. Simply rain on sand isn't going to give you great farmland. But if you also incorporate chemicals like ammonia-based fertilizers, then you can really start to make some headway terraforming this desert into a place that you can actually use for farmland. So that's kind of the timeline. I think that, I'm certainly interested in the ancient civilization that existed possibly during and through the end of the last ice age. I 100% agree that there was most likely a cataclysm that destroyed this ancient civilization, and that all of these structures across the globe were built in the time period immediately following that cataclysm in an attempt to reestablish their civilization, with the Egyptian pyramids being the pinnacle execution of this chemistry and physics technology. It started with the stone circles and these passage chamber reactors like Newgrange and the ones that we found all across Japan, which, according to the conventional timeline, are older than Egyptian pyramids. So it starts with these rudimentary passage chamber reactors and stone circle systems that were capturing lightning. And then they took that to its pinnacle execution with the Egyptian pyramids, which were also powered by lightning.
Having gold caps would probably attract lightning too from up there.
Absolutely. So it's still a bit of a mystery to see what the top of the Great Pyramid specifically was capped with. But yeah, absolutely. It has been proposed that there was an electrum cap on the top of the Great Pyramid. And we actually just got back from an expedition and tour to Upper Egypt, where a lot of these red granite obelisks are also reported to have been capped with electrum.
Really? So that's,
and
I remember
proposed that the obelisk is basically a lightning rod.
Wow.
Holy cow. I have not.
Yeah, this is interesting. A lot of the ancient lightning gods are also fertility gods.
Correct. Absolutely.
Zeus,
there's always
Thor, Indris.
Yep. There's a hand in hand connection. They also have these same deities all across Japan as well. There's a god called Susanoo, which is the thunder and lightning god that's also directly connected to fertility. And across all of the temple structures in Japan, they have these decorative things. There are these big twisted ropes that are called shimenawa, and these lightning symbols that are called shide. And the big twisted rope is literally meant to represent a thunderstorm cloud. They have these sheafs of agricultural material that represent fertility, and of course the shide representing lightning. So again, in my opinion, again, also going back to what's been proposed on the Thunderbolts project and electric universe theory, this mythology across the planet was actually their history. It wasn't myths to them. It was a way for them to orally transmit the knowledge that their civilization had accumulated over thousands and thousands of years. And these deities were actually encoded with profound knowledge of the technology and their understanding of both physics and chemistry.
It's a great way to actually pass on information, because when you realize that languages have changed, however that does, really the only way you're left with is visually.
Symbolism.
Yeah.
Especially if you go from a more advanced civilization to a less advanced civilization, there will be some concepts that you can't even wrap your mind around if you're like a Bronze Age hunter and you're trying to decipher what ancient people that had access to like actual technology were doing.
Hey, have you guys seen
at the risk Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Have you guys seen that video with the sumo wrestlers and the pose that they make right before they go into the ring and their costumes?
Yeah, that whole thing is connected to lightning and thunder symbols.
Yeah, let's see it.
You can't see my feet, but my feet are spread out. Does that look a little familiar from Thunderbolt's point of view?
Oh yeah, it does. The stick man.
The stick man. They actually do the stick man image before they go in the ring.
That's interesting. The stick man's a little skinnier, but I get where you're coming from.
It is.
Yeah, but the whole stomping on the ground before they proceed with the actual tournament, that's made to represent thunder. And then they also have sort of a lightning pattern on their I don't know what you call their little underwear garment, but it's also indicative of lightning. So that permeates all of the mythology and symbolism in Japan. So that was one of the reasons that we were so keenly interested in studying and researching these structures.
Jeff, was that you? Was that you who posted that video
Of
the
the
sumo
sumo guys?
wrestlers?
Possibly. I do. I love sumo. I think it's a really, really cool sport. And but I don't know if it was me that posted that.
That was fascinating. We'll have to pull that up. As you were talking about some of the Japanese gods, I was looking them up on my phone, and it's amazing how many of them resemble these dragon forms that we have all seen.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I spelled that one right. You said Komichio? Komichio? Crap, I'm not even, I forgot what you just said, or even if I typed it in right, but you know, we've got these.
Oh yeah. No. Yes.
I mean, that's
so the god's name
Udon.
is Susanoo.
Oh, okay.
But I will say, so my work has also led me to the conclusion that these dragons and these large serpent deities like Kukulkan are also directly connected to lightning.
Yeah.
The Avebury
Well-
complex is known as the Avebury Serpent Temple Complex. And you also see these dragon deities associated with all the temples and structures around Japan. And I think there's a direct connection between that symbolism of the fire-breathing dragon, the deity Kukulkan descending on the pyramid of Chichen Itza, which also happens to correspond with the beginning of their agricultural rain, thunder, and lightning season. So literally, when Kukulkan descends upon the pyramid during this ceremony, during the equinox, that literally marks the beginning of their agricultural and rain season. So it was literally lightning bringing agricultural fertilizer and rain to their civilization that's marked by this equinox. It may be equinox or solstice. I don't remember off the top of my head, but when that shadow figure descends down the pyramid of Chichen Itza, that's literally the deity Kukulkan, otherwise lightning, bringing rain and atmospheric fertilization to the agricultural areas.
That is awesome. That is so cool. Matt, have you heard about that? You know about the shadow? You know what he's talking about?
No.
Jeff, I do, but I want to hear Jeff. Jeff, tell Matt about the shadow coming down on the pyramid. My voice.
Yeah, so the steps on the side of Chichen Itza, once a year during I believe it's the spring equinox, the shadow moves down the steps and makes a descending snake figure that sort of slithers down the steps of the pyramid of Chichen Itza. And it's a big celebration because, again, it marks the beginning of their agricultural season. And this serpent, this feather dragon deity, is, in my opinion, representative of lightning. Because, again, there's always a connection between lightning, rain, and agriculture. And this is the beginning of the rain season, the beginning of their agricultural season. And in my opinion, there's a connection between the lightning storms that were happening and these atmospheric fertilizers.
Wow. The feathers maybe represent clouds or flying or something. That's interesting.
In his book, The Fourth Phase of Water, Dr. Gerald Pollack talks about in the later chapters about how farmers, like U.S. farmers, know that their crops don't green up until the first thunderstorm of the year.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Jeff,
it's
to hear you say that,
for yeah, any U.S. farmers will know about this connection, and it's a pretty well-known phenomenon. So again, I think that this Neolithic civilization would have had a profound interest in studying these events, and would have had the ability and knowledge to recognize the consequences and the association between thunder, lightning, rain, and then the effect on the agricultural areas. And again, I've had people say that my work is mundane and practical, which some people could take that as an insult, but I take that as the highest compliment, because feeding the people would have been the utmost priority for this ancient civilization. It wasn't about the electricity. It's all about the food. If you don't have food to eat, your civilization will die off. And again, if we're talking about a civilization that lived through the end of the last ice age, they were in dire straits and in the need of implementing all of their knowledge and technology to rebuild this civilization and reinvigorate these farmlands, bring more rain, electrify the soil, and bring the world literally back to life by recirculating electrical energy into the globe, which also has a direct effect on stimulating a phenomenon known as telluric currents. There's a direct connection between lightning and telluric currents that I've discovered in my research, where Areas where there are profound fluctuations in telluric currents are also big targets for lightning strikes. And this goes to a symbol called the Ouroboros, which I believe is sort of indicative and symbolically representing the recirculation of electrical energy and the way that, well, our entire solar system works, but also the electrical phenomenon here on the planet.
Yeah.
Right.
That fits right in with Andy Hall's stuff.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating. I love telluric currents, and it's absolutely stunning. It stuns me that we don't talk more about that. That when you say telluric currents to people, their eyes glaze over. They have no idea what you're talking about. And yet, there are universities. In fact, there's one in Brazil that does lightning studies, and they took actual pictures, slow motion photography of lightning bolts coming down. But as we all know here, when that happens, if you look at it, there are feeders coming up from the ground. Now, kids,
Yep.
that can't happen unless there's an electric charge in the ground. That can't happen. So to think that telluric currents are just not even important is just to be profoundly ignorant.
So if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's a phenomenon called a stepped leader.
It is. That's it.
Which I also believe is, let me blow your mind here, connected to an esoteric symbol known as Jacob's ladder.
Wow. That's fantastic. But Geoffrey,
so there's lots of esoteric information encoded in these symbols sort of all across the globe. And if you take time to really study these things, the picture becomes very clear that there's ancient knowledge encoded in these symbols. And at the risk of crashing the internet one more time, I think it's really important that I show you some of these slides, because it's really going to blow your mind.
Yes.
So let me give this a shot here.
Alrighty.
And if it crashes our connection, we'll just we'll take a second, reconnect and do it.
All right. Can you guys see my screen now?
I see 5 figurines. Yes.
Okay. So my channel is called The Land of Chem, CHEM, which is a play on words for the original name for Egypt, which is KHEM.
Right.
KHEM being the etymology of our modern, or the etymological root for our modern word for chemistry. Chem became alchemy and is now chemistry. So it's a play on words for the original name for Egypt, which is Chem, the land of Chem being the land of chemistry. And in episode 146, I talk about the function of the Egyptian obelisk as a lightning rod.
Wow.
And this is from a recent members only episode where, as we were traveling across Japan, you can see this structure here on the left, which is known as a shatra. And these shatra are erected at the top of Japanese pagoda structures, and they operate as lightning rods because these pagoda structures are incredibly susceptible to lightning strikes. And these shatra have a very interesting esoteric symbol encoded configuration, and these things are actually connected to ground wires. Whoa. So they are literal lightning rods. However, as I mentioned, I believe that this is connected to the recirculation of electric current from lightning back into the ground, which stimulates telluric currents at these sites, and it literally brings the temple structures and the bedrock foundation to life with these telluric currents. So, of course, this directly connects into the prolific work of Anthony Peratt from his seminal paper, The Characteristics of Occurrence of High Current Z-pinch Aurora as Recorded in Antiquity. And as I was preparing for this episode, I started looking at these Z-pinch formations with these series of 9 cylinders, and I realized exactly what I was looking at in the Japanese shatra, that these cylinders that were experimentally produced in these plasma Z-pinch formations, as you can see here, it sort of has a crown type feature at the top. It has these cylindrical formations going down the structure. And you can actually see this one here looking very much like a JED pillar, which we'll get to here in just a moment. I think that this plasma Z-pinch phenomenon is exactly what we see encoded in the Japanese shatra.
Wow.
Holy crap.
It's literally the exact same thing. So whoever designed this thing, It's 9.
It's 9. It's
Yeah.
9. I just read that. I just read that in Anthony Perret's paper that was going to have 9 toroids in it.
It's
there
a
it is.
perfect fit.
Holy
So this
crap.
this is first and foremost a functional piece of technology that literally directly connects to ancient lightning technology, as these standing stones, menhir, and obelisks. So the standing stones and menhir of ancient Japan and ancient Europe being the predecessor of the Egyptian obelisk. Again, everything in Egypt started with these stone circle and passage chamber structures, but they were taken to their peak execution of the technology in Egypt. So what we see is these huge standing stone menhir structures later became the Egyptian obelisk in Egypt, and this exact same technology was implemented to protect the pagoda with these lightning rod structures, again, being perfectly reflective of this plasma Z-pinch phenomenon. Of course, we all know that this was from symbols of an alien sky, these huge plasma Z-pinch formations that were being witnessed by this ancient civilization across the globe when the configuration of planets were much different, creating celestial scale plasma discharge phenomenon. So, of course, you know about this Venus figure that we see over here on the left, which we see modeled in pottery figurines from these ancient civilizations all across the globe. And this is another plasma figure here that was modeled in the Indian thunderbolt weapon known as the Varja. This is the exact same thing as one of these plasma formations, and this is known as the thunderbolt weapon.
Yeah, Thor has one too.
Yeah, there are all these connections between lightning, plasma, the ancient mythological deities across the planet, and these little figurines. So if you take this one, which I call the owl eyes, and you merge it onto this Venus figure, that is exactly what we have in the pottery figurines of the ancient Jomon civilization. This one specifically known as Atahabaki.
Wow.
Which is the lightning deity that has these same owl eyes and a very similar Venus body figure to what we see sort of in ancient Greece with the Venus figures. You also see these in Turkey. These sort of figures are found all across the globe. So this ancient Jomon civilization in Japan was witnessing these same type of celestial plasma discharge formations, and they were modeling them into little figurines. And I believe that this was also the inspiration of this lightning technology. This civilization would, again, fascination, reverence, awe, fear, but also being the source of their knowledge and technology, where they would have studied these things and would have tried to learn all of the effects and capabilities of this technology. And here, this is a lightning rod, a crushed lightning rod from a kerosene factory that was first used to describe the physics of a G-pinch circa 1905, where this thing got melted into kind of a Z-pinch figure lightning rod. Wow. So that brings us directly to this experimental figure here, which looks very much like the Jed pillar that we have from ancient Egypt. And I've always had a suspicion that the Jed pillar that we see here was actually a lightning arrestor.
Was this placed on top of structures then?
So I'll go in. I have a slide for that here in just a second. So one thing to mention is that no Jed pillar has actually ever been found. Like no massive pillar has ever been discovered in Egypt. These are all just little amulets and hieroglyphic figures that are, they're found all over Egypt, but we've never actually found an actual Jed pillar. Let me turn my light on.
What does a Jed pillar do?
So the Jed pillar is conventionally explained as representing the backbone of Osiris.
Interesting.
And it is connected to both balance and stability, which I'll get into the esoteric interpretation of that description here in just a moment. So Jed pillar. We also see the Jed pillar again. I don't think that these are light bulbs in the Dendara crypt. I believe that this is knowledge of the manifestation of the physical universe being permeated with electric current, perhaps plasma, again, being supported by the Jed pillar, which represents balance and stability of electrical phenomenon, which is directly connected to its potential function as a lightning arrestor that would provide balance and stability to electrically connected components in the event of excess electrical discharge.
It's interesting.
So lightning. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting that there are 4 levels or 4 tiers of the JED pillar, and it's consistent. That
Correct.
has to be significant.
And I've always felt that this was a functional artifact, a functional piece of technology. And of course, we've never found anything, but this is completely speculative. But the reason a lightning arrestor works is because of a metal oxide varistor, right? Which is a semiconductor, insulative at low volt. Well, I don't have to explain it to you guys. You guys know how it works, right?
So
typically in these MOVs, yep, go ahead.
He does. I do not.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So let me go back here. So the reason that a lightning arrestor works is because of these metal oxide varistors, which is an insulator at low voltage and a conductor at high voltage. So when a normal amount of electrical current is flowing through a system, these MOVs and the lightning arrestor doesn't do anything. It just lets the current flow along its normal path. For example, through a power line into the transformer and into your house. It doesn't do anything. But if that line were to get struck by lightning, the MOV becomes a conductor and it gives that excess voltage a path directly into the ground. So instead of a massive electrical discharge surging through your transformer, blowing up the transformer and frying all the equipment in your house, it sends that high voltage electric current directly into the ground.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
So it's a very useful piece of technology. And these things are made of zinc oxide and antimony. And as soon as I started putting all my research together regarding these MOVs in this episode for the members only channel, I remembered that we had also found zinc and antimony inside the red pyramid. So I have an extensive series on my channel presenting all of the chemical analysis data that we've collected throughout Egypt. And this one is from the drip staining on the walls inside the red pyramid in Dashur. This sample here is almost 90% zinc. And this one is 50% antimony. And as soon as I saw that zinc antimony MOV disc, I immediately remembered, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. And I remember that in our chemical analysis data from the red pyramid. So that's what I think these JED pillar artifacts may have been, is zinc antimony MOV lightning arrestors. And they could have been implemented into systems. For example, you have here the Karnak temple in Luxor. So let's say that this is an electrically connected system of different components. And I've explained how these Sphinx avenues may have also acted as voltage transformer systems, basically step down voltage transformers. So you can install your JED pillar lightning arrestor somewhere in this system before your voltage transformer. So this is the avenue of Sphinxes here, leading to your next interconnected component. And there are sacred lakes here and here that are connected by underground conduits of flowing water. This water is super high in minerals and would have been an excellent conductor of electricity. We've also found all across the Giza Plateau that the components of the Giza Plateau are connected by metal mineral veins. And Ben, I saw that you're keenly interested in producing fulgurites, and I have some chemical analysis data of fulgurites that we have discovered on the Giza Plateau that I also have here in just a second. So you can install this JED. You could install this JED pillar component anywhere before your transformer. So let's say that this system and the obelisks within the Karnak temple are designed to get struck with lightning and send a specific amount of voltage into your interconnected component. Well, what happens if it gets struck by lightning multiple times, or the bolt of lightning had an excess amount of voltage that was beyond the capacity for the system? So then that excess voltage goes into the transformer or into the lightning arrestor, and it sends the excess voltage down into the ground, thus providing balance and stability for your electrical system.
Where'd you
So this
gotta be kidding.
this is a symbol that we found in the new Grand Egyptian Museum of the Djed pillar. And this symbol here, enclosed in the little globe, represents the horizon, or essentially the manifestation of creation. So the Djed pillar supports the horizon, supports the manifestation of creation, providing balance and stability. You could also look at this as the perspective of, if this was a functional object, an artifact, a piece of technology, the Djed pillar is then providing balance and support for the electrical phenomenon within the system.
Holy
which
crap!
Which is exactly what a lightning arrestor does. It balances and it stabilizes and it protects from excess voltage in the event that the initial input of voltage is beyond the capacity for the particular system.
Oh, that's wild.
That is brilliant.
So that's a little introduction into the Jomon civilization, the connection between the Jomon pottery and the Venus figures, the plasma Z-pinch being connected to the Shatra, lightning rod technology. This is all just a small part of my research. So my hypothesis covers these obelisk, standing stone, menhir lightning rods. It talks about the stone circles and atmospheric fertilization, the connection between these lightning, rain, and fertilizer deities, passage chamber structures like Newgrange, and then, of course, into the Egyptian pyramids. And let me see where I want to go here next, since we're talking about the
You should paint your roof blue.
I need to go get some more duct tape to wrap it around my head because my head's gonna freaking explode again.
Yeah, this
well,
is
so I also want to extend an invite. If you or any of your colleagues are interested in coming to Egypt to see this for yourself, I am hosting a huge tour in November. You already have my email address, but just send me a follow-up email with the subject line. And anybody that's watching this, if you're interested in coming to Egypt, send me an email to contact@thelandofchem.com with the subject line Egypt 2025 tour, something of that nature, and I'll send you the full tour itinerary and pricing details. So one thing a lot of people don't know about on the Giza Plateau, sort of transitioning, I can do a brief overview of my hypothesis on the Egyptian pyramids. Should I do that first before we get into the Lichtenberg figures?
yeah, please.
Yes. And
Okay.
I wasn't ignoring you, Jeff. I was writing that down on my to-do list. That's my to-do list right there. So you're writing down, or you're telling the address, and I'm writing it all down right there. So yeah, go ahead.
All right. So let me pull this one up here.
When in November?
And
First
these
of
are
November, middle of November?
The first 2 weeks in November.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. So this image here is of a bedrock deposit. It's basically the top of a bedrock methane deposit. These are called caps. And you can see this black material here is bedrock sandstone that is permeated with decayed organic material that creates these subterranean deposits of bedrock methane or natural gas. That's how this stuff forms. Is over hundreds of millions of years, this agricultural carbon-based material in the bedrock gradually decomposes and it creates pockets of methane gas deep in the bedrock. It just so happens that the Step Pyramid in Saqqara is located on what I believe is one of these bedrock methane deposits. This is what the bedrock inside the Step Pyramid looks like. All of the other bedrock that I have ever seen in Egypt is the color of limestone. But when you go down into the Step Pyramid, there is a very specific transition between limestone bedrock and organic material permeated black bedrock. And this is not soot. I have done an up-close investigation on numerous occasions inside of the Step Pyramid, and hopefully one day I'll be able to get a sample of this material to verify this hypothesis. I will say that all of the samples that have been collected from Egypt were from my colleagues at the Asida project that was done back in 2010. And thankfully, they collected an abundant amount of material. that being said, it's illegal to take samples in Egypt, and I've never collected any samples, and I'm very, very careful about respecting the rules and the laws here. But hopefully one day we'll be able to get a sample of this material to verify that this is a carbon deposit. Here again, you can see looking up at the vertical shaft inside the step pyramid, it's completely black, the bedrock down inside this thing. These are the tunnels below the step pyramid that are also permeated with this black material. And you can see how black this bedrock is. So I believe that this goes into the extensive knowledge of geology that was possessed by the civilization that built these structures. They had not only an extensive ability to test and determine where these deposits existed, but then also excavate into them and build technology surrounding these natural formations. And this is going to be directly applicable to what we see on the Giza Plateau with the utilization of the hydrothermal mineral deposits that are all over the Giza Plateau. These iron and other various metal mineral deposits, they're like veins branching across the entire Giza Plateau, which, as I'll get to in just a moment, operate in the same way as Lichtenberg figures for the distribution of high voltage electric current into various components across the system. And Ben, it just so happens that we turned out to find fulgurites and silicate microspheres in our chemical analysis of those metal veins that is directly indicative of high voltage flow through those hydrothermal mineral deposits that are embedded in the bedrock of the Giza Plateau.
Oh, yeah, baby. Got it. Excellent.
Wow. So long story short, my hypothesis on the function of the step pyramid is that it was for extracting these bedrock deposits of methane gas in an operation that's very similar to modern fracking, basically, where you pump water down into these coal seams or these bedrock deposits, and by fluctuating the pressure inside of these, you're able to pump out the methane gas. So you increase and decrease the pressure in the system. This allows the gas to percolate up out of the system, and then you can pump it out. So the step pyramid is actually surrounded by a reservoir. And the Latvian mission in 2017 to Saqqara did ground penetrating radar, and they found that the subterranean components of the step pyramid are actually directly connected into two inlets within this external reservoir. Now, another kind of kudos to my work. Did you guys hear about the step pyramid hydraulic construction paper that came out maybe a year ago?
No.
So there was a big paper that was published that the step pyramid was built using this hydraulic lift mechanism. And in this paper, they corroborated two hypotheses that I came out with 2 years ago, way before this study was ever published. First, that a structure known as Gizr El Mudir to the southeast of the step pyramid was a huge water treatment and water purification facility. They said the exact same thing in their paper, and they also corroborated my hypothesis. This is conventionally known as a dry moat, but it's absolutely not a dry moat. It's directly connected into all these subterranean components. And they proposed a similar mechanism of operation that I had in this video more than a year before their paper came out. So a lot of the mechanisms of operation that I've proposed regarding the operation of the step pyramid were later corroborated in this published paper, where they're talking about the construction of the step pyramid, not its function, but utilizing the same mechanisms of operation for actually building the structure. So long story short, you can see these two shafts here are connected into the external reservoir. Those are used to increase the water pressure inside of the subterranean system.
Right.
You then have these series of 11 vertical shafts, which if you raise those up, it's going to decrease the pressure in the system and allow that methane gas to percolate out into the vertical shaft. And the system is just repeated.
They're valves.
They're valves. Yeah, valves and pumps. Basically extracting bedrock methane, pumping it up out of the system.
Oh my God. That is, I was going to ask you, it's like, what was the chamber? How did that actually do it? It was right there. You did it. And you found out. Holy crap.
It just so happens that in Dashur, a few miles away, there is a co-venture facility between Calda Petroleum and Apache Oil that is a
Methane
natural
pumping?
gas and crude oil processing facility.
Yep.
And it is located right across the street from the Red Pyramid, which my hypothesis is that the Red Pyramid was producing an aqueous ammonia solution. And I've had a number of petroleum geologists and engineers that work in the petroleum industry that have contacted me to say, hey, this is brilliant. Just so happens that we use aqueous ammonia in the processing of crude oil today, which of course I was aware of that. You use aqueous ammonia to neutralize the acidic compounds in crude oil for the production of things like bitumen, which the bitumen industry would have been absolutely huge in the ancient world because they use it for waterproofing and sealing boats.
Oh, man.
All right. So that's a brief overview of the step pyramid in Saqqara.
Can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
We've just recently had a bunch of news all over about structures underneath the Great Pyramid, these big cylinder structures.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like it's been debunked, but I'm not. What do I know? Do you have any comment on those?
Oh, he does.
So I made a huge video on that, and I've been following this synthetic aperture radar team since they published their first study in 2022. So they actually had a paper that came out a couple of years ago where they used this same scanning technology, and they first scanned the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
And they had the same sort of spectacular, rather fictional 3D models where they proposed that they discovered all of this stuff inside of the Great Pyramid. And I was very, very excited about it. I actually liked it so much that I incorporated some of their stuff, not directly in my theory, but I proposed some hypothetical functions for some of the new components that they discovered in their first scan of the Great Pyramid. That being said, in my first video on it, I also expressed my skepticism of the technology, specifically its inability to reliably detect the known chambers. So that's sort of in my opinion, again, I'm not an expert on SAR technology. I'm not an academic. I don't have any professional qualifications to critique this work. However, if they wanted to approach it scientifically, their first objective should have been, let's show that this new technology can reliably detect the known structures inside of the Great Pyramid. And we're going to show how time after time after time, we can show exactly where the known structures are inside of the pyramid, which their scanning technology has a really, really difficult time, sometimes missing it completely, where it cannot pick up the known chambers. And they just made a statement regarding their new scan of the central pyramid, where their quote was that the known chambers are embedded in a limestone slab. And their scanning technology cannot penetrate said limestone slab. The signal is absorbed by this limestone slab. First of all, the known chambers inside of the central pyramid are not in a limestone slab. They are excavated from the limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau. This is a known archaeological fact. It's not a limestone slab. It is bedrock. And their quote was that the signal cannot penetrate the limestone and it can't detect the known chambers because the signal gets absorbed by the limestone.
That sounds like trouble.
How can you propose any other conclusions from your research?
Exactly.
If your radar signal cannot penetrate said limestone bedrock.
Exactly.
But yet you are going to propose that it can go 2 kilometers deep and find hidden structures when you can't find what we know is there that is in limestone.
So I watched your presentation on that when that came out. Like I heard that and then I watched your presentation and I heard you make all these arguments, but you just doubled down on it again because Jeff, you're absolutely right.
And this was
I mean,
a
that's
statement. You could go find it on the Coffer Project Facebook channel. You can go find one of the issues with our scan. Yeah, we can't detect the known chambers in the central pyramid because they're in this limestone slab, and the signal gets absorbed by the limestone. That should completely falsify any of their other conclusions. That being said, I'm into it, and I was excited about it, and I was enthusiastic about it, and like, again, I could have very easily interpreted that data and incorporated it in my hypothesis because I could make it work. And they've discovered some what looks to be some cool stuff, but I'm very, very skeptical about the capabilities of the technology. It can't detect the known chambers. There's so much signal noise in the background, and the radar doesn't actually penetrate the structure.
Right.
What it's doing is picking up micro vibrations on the surface, that what they call phonons, and it's using a software program to interpret the intensity of these variations in the phonons as indicative of potential hidden chambers and structures.
right.
So again, it's an experimental technology. I did a whole video on it, basically an hour and a half, breaking down their first one, showing all of the images from their original research paper, where they literally overlaid the geometry and the known configuration of the Great Pyramid on their scans. It can't detect the internal chambers. They're just not there on the scans. So that's a big deficiency in the technology. And again, if they wanted to do this from a really scientific perspective, that should be objective number one. Before proposing that we discovered the halls of Amenti and lost civilization 2 kilometers below the, all this stuff that they're saying. Also, one of their members of their team is a known UFOologist. He's big into the Anunnaki and ancient, this, that, and the others. And, believe whatever you want to believe, but it doesn't add academic credibility to their team, unfortunately. And I'm not academically or professionally qualified to critique it. I can give my opinion, but I think they made some mistakes in the way that they're presenting the material. So it's fascinating. I certainly think there's a potential for discovering some stuff below the Giza Plateau. Specifically, so I've been in a system called the Tomb of the Birds, which is a huge iron oxide tunnel that goes down into the bedrock below the Giza Plateau. It runs below the pyramids. And we know that the Giza Plateau itself, 500 million years ago, was the bottom of an ocean called the Tethys Sea. And the bedrock of the Giza Plateau was formed by this ancient seafloor. And these hydrothermal mineral vents that I'll talk about, or these mineral deposits in the bedrock of the limestone of the Giza Plateau, are indicative of hydrothermal systems that were occurring on this seafloor. And they have hydrothermal tunnels and caves running below the Giza Plateau. I've been in it myself, and I know for sure that these things do exist. So what they are interpreting, possibly from their scanned data, as being the halls of Amenti and a giant city discovered under the Giza Plateau, isn't actually a city at all, but they're picking up evidence of these tunnels and caves that run below the Giza Plateau that are permeated with substantial metal or mineral deposits. These things are all over the Giza Plateau. Wow. So I do think there's some potential in what they're discovering. I don't think they're interpreting it correctly. Again, they're going more down the sensational route than the practical, academic, scientific route. But again, that's up to them for them to present their data however they want. And I think they made some big mistakes in the way they presented the stuff. So yeah, I did a big video on that, and there's going to be a follow-up part 2 whenever they publish their second formal paper, which should be coming out soon. So I think there's some potential to it. I do think that they've discovered evidence of what does lie below the Giza Plateau, which I've been in it myself. I know for sure these tunnels exist.
Let me ask you
it's
this.
Not a city.
You said that they're iron oxide chambers. Iron oxide all the way around, floor, ceiling, walls?
Correct.
Just on the floor?
No, it's literal tunnels that are they're
But the iron oxide, does the iron oxide go all the way around it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. They're called hypogenic caves, hypogenic iron oxide caves, which are the result of hydrothermal vent systems coming up from the seafloor that put all of these mineral deposits into the bedrock. And they're all over Giza.
So they're both vertical.
And it's not just iron oxide. It's you name the metal, we have found it in the chemical analysis data. Gold, silver, neodymium, ruthenium, platinum, chromium. You name the metal, we have found it in the chemical analysis data.
Let me guess that these chambers are going to follow a Lichtenberg pattern.
So that's what we see on the surface of the Giza Plateau. So the core of both the Great Pyramid and the Central Pyramid is permeated with these iron and metal ore mineral deposits. I have documented this on numerous occasions where we've been down into the bedrock foundation of the Great Pyramid and the Central Pyramid. So the core of both of these structures has these primordial mounds of metal ore minerals. From these mounds, branch-like vein networks emanate. And these veins stretch all across the Giza Plateau from these central mounds. So there's huge mounds of these metal ore mineral deposits, and these veins branch all over the Giza Plateau. Now, in my opinion, these are natural hydrothermal mineral deposits. However, they act the same way as a Lichtenberg figure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And we've found silicate microspheres and fulgurites in these metal ore deposits, which is, I don't ever like to say proof, but it's pretty substantial evidence of high voltage electrical flow through these metal deposits. Yep. And it's not just iron. There's very conductive metals like gold and silver in these things, and also deposits of electrum.
Yeah. We just interviewed Andy Hall, and he was talking about underground circuitry.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. And that was the reason that the Giza Plateau was strategically selected for the construction of the Giza manufacturing and mining system. So we talked about ammonia a little bit. So methane is a ubiquitously useful fuel for domestic and industrial purposes. You can then convert that methane into ammonia. You can use it for all sorts of stuff, for metallurgical applications, for smelting, etc. It has a bunch of applications. Ammonia and other fertilizers for agriculture. Then we go on to the Giza Plateau, which was producing dilute solutions of sulfuric and hydrochloric acid that were utilized for both metallurgy and mining. The Giza Plateau is a huge industrial mining and chemical manufacturing operation. And they selected the Giza Plateau because it had abundant supply of metal ore. It had all of the interconnected veins for the distribution of electrical current into various components. And it was a source of hydrogen sulfide gas. So these hydrothermal vents also have hydrogen sulfide gas, which is an initial reactant in the reaction process to produce said sulfuric acid. So it had all of the natural resources that were required for the construction of these monuments in one place. The Giza Plateau is a very, very special location.
I want to know what tools they used to find all this stuff.
Yeah.
How did they know?
How did they know? I mean, were they remote viewing? Did they have little handheld devices? I mean, how did they know?
Yeah. Yeah. So it goes even further than that, to where the metal ore mineral vein network also connects into structures that are underground, like the Osiris shaft.
Oh. Well, remember, Ben, the Hermetics remember the time before the last 6 floods. So these guys must have had some knowledge passed down.
Yeah, so let me show you this here. We can skip ahead a little bit. Here we go.
Sorry,
why the star alignment?
Didn't mean to jump ahead too much. I'm just my brain.
No, it's all good.
Going.
I don't know how long you guys want to go.
We've got 2 or 3 weeks.
Want to stop.
Yeah, we got 2 or 3 weeks.
So let me go down to this here. Boop, boop, boop. All right. Proof of lightning, Calanase stone circle. So this is a fascinating paper from St. Andrews University where they actually discovered proof of lightning at ancient stone circles, huge magnetic anomaly at the center of the Calanase stone circle, which is directly from lightning strikes. Fascinating paper, came out a couple of years ago. Let me see if I can find the original paper.
Hold on.
Here.
Where is this? Where is this?
So it's in Scotland.
My wife's from Scotland.
Yeah, the Calanase stone circle. St. Andrews University. This structure here. I did an episode. What episode was that? 119. I also have a whole playlist on my channel for all of my research about lightning and stone circles. So if anybody wants to check that out,
I'm plowing my way through that, Jeff. There's a lot, and I've been slowly watching them all.
All right. So can you see this slide here with the samples?
Yeah.
Yes, in the little baggies.
Okay, so these are some of the samples that we've collected from various areas of the Giza Plateau, specifically from these pits here surrounding the central pyramid. And I've been down in these things on multiple occasions. I've shown it in tons of Sunday site visits, but we have tons of samples of the metal ore that's down inside these pits. You can see me here, this reddish brown material here. Mm-hmm. It's all over the Giza Plateau, and these are these metal ore mineral deposits. And you can see me here down in one of these highly eroded metal ore pits. Whoa. This pit is completely filled with this metal ore mineral deposit. This is one of the veins down in that pit.
Oh, wow.
It is a huge, probably, at least 2 feet wide, tubular vein of iron oxide ore, but there's also a ton of other metals that are in this material. And these things run all over the Giza Plateau, both on the surface and subsurface.
Let me interrupt a second.
Yeah.
Do these veins, do you think they form when lightning comes down and it literally melts the mineral content in the soil into Lichtenberg patterns and sucks in the metal to form these veins?
So I think that the veins themselves are natural formations because of the hydrothermal system that was this ancient seafloor on the Giza Plateau. These hydrothermal vents literally spew out minerals, and they create these mineral formations that get embedded in the bedrock. So I think that these were natural formations, but they operate the exact same way that what you're describing is. They give it a selective path for the electric current to flow.
Right.
And the first time the system got hit by lightning, these metal iron oxide deposits, the oxygen would have been released, and they would essentially been like metal pipes.
Yeah.
And we found many of these deposits that it doesn't even look like iron oxide. It's like a bar of iron embedded into the bedrock of the Giza Plateau.
Yeah, that makes me think that it's the lightning that's forming the pathways. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure the metal is coming up from the hydrothermal vents, but we see the same thing along Birkeland currents in outer space where all the dust, surrounding dust, gets pulled in to form planets and stars.
Yeah.
Well, anytime you get an electric discharge, it segregates the elements and the minerals to different layers.
Right.
So, right. I'm thinking, and Andy Hall talks about this, like on the surface of the Earth, canyon valleys, he said this over and over, were once electrical discharges that wind and water then came and followed and finished carving it out. But originally, the genesis of our river valleys were electric strikes. And I'm wondering if that's not what we're seeing here with these pipes.
Yeah, and it's also what Andy was saying about how all electric circuits are intelligent. It's like they're building their own circuitry.
Yep. So here you can see, so this is rare earth metals that have been discovered in here. Praseodymium, nemium, samarium, europium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, holmium. You name the rare earth metals.
Wow.
They have been discovered in these various pits. Then here we also have stuff like nickel and lead that have been discovered in these metal deposits. This is platinum, 35% platinum here in this sample.
Wow.
This one is neodymium, 30% neodymium. This one has some This one has cerium, neodymium, and thorium. We have also found thorium in some of the chemical analysis from inside of the red pyramid. These are silver, 42%, 59%, and 70% silver. These ones are silver and gold. This one's gold, 56%, 5% silver. So we found all sorts of metals in the chemical analysis of these mineral veins. This is one of these deposits right here near the trial passages. And we've also discovered silicate microspheres from fulgurites.
Of course you have.
So
Wow.
in these mineral veins, there is substantial evidence of high voltage electrical current flow being distributed through these metal or mineral deposits.
That spheroid is a smoking gun.
Oh yeah,
I
we
believe
found
so, too.
multiple. So this is the first one that was discovered in an area called the trial passages. This is another one of these mineral pits here. And the reason that I think that these are natural deposits is these mineral deposits aren't just in vein formations. They're also in large circular clumps and in these cave formations. So they're not necessarily all like dendritic patterns. They're also in other sort of shapes and sizes and formations. So it's not all indicative of electrical current flow from like a Lichtenberg figure or a dendritic pattern. They're all sorts of different formations, like huge, massive deposits.
Yeah.
So this is the second one here in this pit, which is also adjacent to the central pyramid, where we found the second silica microsphere. So again, we found fulgurites and silicate microspheres in these chemical deposits. So this is the Osiris shaft. The lower chamber here is 100 feet below the Giza Plateau, 30 meters underground.
Whoa.
And the second level here, you can see a bunch of housings that have been excavated. This is all excavated out of the bedrock. And there are these housings on the second level of the Osiris shaft. Well, check out what we have here.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
These veins.
Wow.
So they meticulously excavated the chambers of the Osiris shaft so precisely that this system would integrate directly with the metal veins. These metal mineral deposits connect all of the components across the Giza Plateau. This is a huge formation here where it's actually been chiseled out of the wall. But up here, you can see the dark red material, and it would have branched out into this whole housing. And I have actually mapped this entire system. And I'll show you the map here in just a sec. And so I have pretty extensive documentation in my Sunday site visit series. So this right here, this is in the bedrock of the Great Pyramid as we were heading down into the subterranean chamber, which is also excavated from the bedrock. You can see here on the left, these metal ore deposits. And this is a huge vein running through the bedrock below the Great Pyramid. This is the bedrock primary chamber of the Central Pyramid. Again, we were just talking about how the Central Pyramid is excavated from bedrock. This section is all bedrock. The top part of the ceiling is limestone masonry, but all of this is bedrock. And I was in here in 2020. You can see the vein that's now been covered over in concrete running down the wall of the chamber. Yeah. So this bedrock chamber is also permeated with these metal ore mineral deposits. And I have some up-close video where I show that the whole thing has been filled in with modern concrete, but you can see down here and here this reddish iron oxide material, and this vein runs through the bedrock in the central pyramid. We've also looked up into a excavated tunnel in the center of the central pyramid and discovered the same iron oxide. So here at the core of the Great Pyramid is a mound of bedrock that is permeated with these metal ore mineral deposits. And I've mapped the branching that emanates from the core of the Great Pyramid, and it stretches across the Giza Plateau into the boat pits. It branches out to the 3 subsidiary pyramids here. It connects down this way into the causeway area, into this section. And this one also leads out in this direction, and this is the location of the Osiris shaft. So we know that this vein continues underground, below the bedrock, and connects down into the Osiris shaft. We also have the core of the central pyramid, and I've mapped all of the veins coming out of the central pyramid that connect into these pits. It connects directly into the central pyramid temple, and the veins also continue all the way down to the Sphinx and Valley Temple. And I have a series on my YouTube channel called Giza Iron Veins, where I have both of these episodes with the chemical analysis data and extensive on-site documentation during our Sunday site visits. My wife and I, shout out to my wife, Alexa, Ancient Odysseys. Go check out her channel as well. Also, go subscribe to Let's Go with Lex and G, which is our food and adventure and travel channel. And for all you cat lovers out there, we have a channel called Egyptian Trash Cats, where I'm a cat dad, and I take care of about 15 or 20 Egyptian street cats that live outside of our building. But every week we go out to various structures across Egypt, Japan, Ireland, the UK, and it's a Sunday site visit series where I take you along to explore all these structures on site. And I've documented all of this mapping process with on-site footage. So
yes,
this
you
is
do.
the
They're
Giza
fascinating.
Plateau, the Giza Plateau iron network that connects all of these structures across the Giza Plateau for the distribution of electric current.
That was my question. I was going to say, this looks like, and forgive me if you've already said this looks like wiring diagrams.
Yeah. So the whole power structure worked off the pyramids getting struck by lightning.
Correct. My hypothesis is that the Great and Central Pyramid were both being struck by lightning. Now, this also directly facilitated the chemical reaction. So the product isn't electricity. I actually rather strongly disagree with the conclusion that the product of the pyramid is electricity. The power source is naturally occurring electrical phenomenon that's also directly connected to telluric currents. So it's sort of a self-stimulating system where the lightning stimulates the telluric currents stimulate more lightning, and it also has to do with the dielectric nature of the limestone itself.
So
you've
Geoffrey,
got into that a couple times before too.
are you going to take away my Lighthouse of Alexandria and Ark of the Covenant that goes in the King's Chamber?
So we've actually done an episode specifically breaking down the Ark of the Covenant dimensions, and it fits, but it's not a precise fit. The length of the Ark is much shorter than the length of the sarcophagus. So people have implied that it's a precise fit, like it, like zero tolerance fit. That's not true. The Ark of the Covenant is much, much later in the timeline than the construction of the Great Pyramid. Conventional timeline speaking, the Great Pyramid being built during the 4th dynasty, the Jewish exodus from Egypt happening during the 18th and 19th dynasty. So we're talking about, I believe it's like 1,500 years apart from the conventional date of the Great Pyramid and the Ark of the Covenant. Now, that being said, I do absolutely think that the Ark of the Covenant was a functional artifact, a piece of technology, and it's directly connected to something known as the Egyptian solar boat, which in our Upper Egypt adventure that we just got back from, there's housings within these temple structures that are known as the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was designed to house this solar boat artifact. So I believe that the Ark of the Covenant is a later iteration of the technology that originated in ancient Egypt.
Geoffrey, let me ask you this. With all of the use of electricity in this, and I really want you to go through the slide that's up on the screen because that is fascinating. Did they have a way to store this electricity once the lightning bolt hits? Have you run across that capability?
Like a Baghdad battery? Those big
So lightning is a very, very difficult phenomenon to actually store. The transient electrical current, I believe, induced electric fields within some of the components inside. So we'll get to the Great Pyramid here specifically.
Okay.
I believe that it was utilized to induce electric fields inside of these dielectric materials. In terms of long-term storage, that's a little bit more difficult, where I think if they were storing anything, it most likely came from dielectrics and from telluric currents.
Right.
Because you want sort of a slow feed for charging a battery, not like a blast of hundreds of millions of volts at once. You want to charge a system slowly. And I have found evidence in a place called the Temple of Ptah in Abu Sir. There is a multi-layer sarcophagus, quote unquote sarcophagus container, that has red granite on the outside, and then when you're talking about zero tolerance layer, a zero tolerance limestone insert on the inside. And then on the inside of the limestone layer, there is metallic oxide staining on the inside of the limestone layer. And I believe that this was originally submerged in a salt water or mineral water solution, because it's below the structure of the temple, and you have these two massive containers, one of which has this dual insert. And again, there most likely was a piece of metal on the inside of this thing as well. So I believe that may have been a telluric current, conductive water, mineral water battery type thing.
Could have even been a Leyden jar.
Or something of that nature, correct, yeah.
What's a Leyden jar?
Just what he described. It's basically a chamber which has I've got one.
Yeah, it's basically two metal containers where if you stack these containers together, you can charge the system with electrical current, and then you can take it apart, and when you put it back together, the electrical current is still there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but we still don't understand the exact mechanisms of operation that once you separate it, you would expect the electrical current to dissipate. And I think that we don't still understand the physics that are involved in why this thing maintains the electrical charge. But you can take it apart and then put it back together and then still get an electrical discharge from a Leyden jar.
That would be your dark mode plasma, right, Ben?
Absolutely. That would absolutely be dark mode plasma. But what Jeff just said is actually really fascinating. And I've done that actual experiment where you take a Leyden jar apart, put it back together, and it still has a charge, which means that's called an electret. When a substance can hold on to an electric charge and permeate it like a magnet. It's like we say magnets, have a magnetic field around it. An electret has an electric field around it. And a Leyden jar looks like it has the same properties. And what Jeff just described with that chamber, with the different layers, is really sounding like either a Leyden jar or an electret, or both.
Fair.
Really fascinating. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Jeff, so Ben, I think this last slide deck would be a good place for us to kind of wrap up, because I'm going to cover a lot of stuff in this last slide deck. But I wanted to ask if you had any questions for me, just like, you've been following my work, and if you had any questions, now would be a good time to just kind of fire some off. I'm happy to answer anything.
Wow. Okay. Yes, the first one is going to go all the way back to the stone circles.
Yes.
And the stone bowls that you talked about at the very beginning of our conversation. Number one, how
Yep.
big were the stone bowls?
Yeah. So the one in Abu Sir is made out of a stone called red quartzite, and it's about 2.5 feet across,
How deep?
probably 1.5 feet deep.
Wow. And you said there was
Oh,
four of them?
it's a big. I mean, it's a big artifact. It's it's huge.
Wow. And number two, the stone circles. Are they actual circles? Are they mounds? What are the like the stone circle? Everyone is familiar with a Stonehenge and henges like
Correct.
that. Are you talking
Yep.
that? Is that the stone circle that you're talking about?
Yeah, so they have various configurations. So Stonehenge
Oh,
is absolutely a stone circle. If we look at some of the Japanese stone circles, they're basically just stones that are embedded into the surface. About like this big, they can be bigger, just embedded into the actual surface of this artificially leveled plateau. And there's always a big obelisk, standing stone menhir at the center. Then they later evolve into sort of upright standing stones that stick up out of the ground. So we found both configurations in Japan. And then specifically when you go into Wales, Scotland, and the UK, they're more upright stones sticking up out of the ground. And again, there's always a primary obelisk, standing stone, or menhir in the center of these things.
wow.
So they have a variety of different configurations, and I think that's indicative of the sort of progress of the technology and also the stylistic utilization between the different areas. Because you could have the same technology in different iterations. For example, the pyramids of Mexico and South America
Exactly.
compared to the pyramids of Egypt, most likely embodying similar technologies. They talk about the pyramid of Teotihuacan, which is supposed to have a river of liquid mercury that was running below this thing, which I believe was involved in the processing of gold, because mercury is very, very useful in extracting gold from metal ore. So I believe the pyramid of Teotihuacan, which is also known as the pyramid of the sun being an esoteric symbol for gold, it's the pyramid of gold. And they were using that liquid mercury to extract gold.
Oh,
The
wow.
first emperor of China's tomb is supposed to have flowing mercury as well.
Correct. Yep. Yep. Now they say that is a booby trap, to release toxic mercury vapor and prevent people from going in there. But again, these Chinese pyramids, same thing in Japan. They're very, very respectful and cautious about the excavation of sacred sites. And there's a pyramid called Pyramid Kuramanta, which is located in Japan, has all the indications. So at the top of this artificial pyramid mountain in Japan, there's a flat top. There was a stone circle system with an obelisk, and they've also discovered evidence of internal chambers. And this mountain is associated with all of this UFO phenomenon and these floating, glowing balls that hover above the structure. It's ball plasma or ball
Yes.
lightning.
Right.
So they had during the excavations of the structure, they believe they cracked into one of the chambers, and then all of a sudden there was this colorful flame coming out of the top of the structure, and they all ran away. And this is I have a great episode on the function of Pyramid Kuramanta on my YouTube channel, where this flaming gas is coming up out of this thing, and it's associated with all this, again, UFO phenomenon, which I think it's ball lightning or ball plasma that's been associated with this particular structure. And this pyramid is also connected via an avenue of stones into a stone circle system. So I think that these stone avenues essentially work like step down voltage transformers, so where voltage is gradually reduced as it flows down the line so that it can be within the capacitance of the dielectric system within the stone circle.
Right.
Wow. Wow.
I got a couple of questions.
Yeah, man.
This is more the stones. The Great Pyramid is made out of. Some of the conspiracies around Egypt involve that there's no way these guys could have made the pyramids with their bronze chisels. When would you hypothesize the Great Pyramids were built? and how were they cutting this stone? Like the boxes and the statuary with their perfect symmetry. Who's the guy that does the thing about the vases that are like ridiculous?
Matt Ball on Limitless is the guy who owns the vase collection. Shout out Matt. He's a really, really good dude, and he's actually coming to Egypt for a tour sometime soon, and we're going to get together here and I'll show him around the pyramid sites. I've actually been really, really fortunate to do a bunch of on-site tours with some other colleagues in the YouTube community, and I'm looking forward to getting. Yeah, but Ben is the guy that not Ben. Matt is the guy that owns the vase collection that everybody's been testing and talking about.
Wow.
So what's your ideas on how these stones were cut?
Yeah. So actually, I did an episode on that a while back. So they've actually done chemical analysis of some material that was found in these cylindrical tube drill cores that everybody talks about, these tube drill cores. And they found a variety of things. The first being arsenical copper. So the big myth that's perpetuated regarding the tools used in Egypt is that it was pure copper. Oh, they're using copper chisels. Well, it wasn't pure copper. It's an alloy of 90% copper and 10% arsenic. And that's the magic of alloys, that by adding a small amount of a different metal, you can completely change the properties of the metal, which actually makes a very, very competent substance known as arsenical bronze, which has been found all across the ancient world, and nobody ever questions the capabilities of arsenical bronze. It's just sort of a myth that these Egyptians were using pure copper.
Sure.
No one would ever use pure copper because it's garbage as a tool. It's not pure copper. It's arsenical copper or arsenical bronze. But the magic of the stone cutting process is not in the blade itself. It is in the abrasive slurry. And this is still how we do stone cutting applications today, where the blade just pushes the material around. So you'll see in all these stone cutting applications where they're pouring a liquid in there, and it actually has microparticles of very, very hard abrasives. So in this chemical analysis, they found arsenical copper, but they also found microparticles of things like ilmenite and corundum. Corundum being the mineral that ruby is made out of. It is the second hardest mineral, second to diamond. So they were using this microparticle abrasive slurry that had, there's a whole bunch of other chemical constituents of this abrasive slurry that they've discovered, but it's ilmenite and corundum is the primary two constituents of the compound. So microparticle abrasives were actually what were doing the cutting.
Huh.
So there's another part.
That being said, I also don't think that they were using, like hand tools. I think that they had most likely water-powered machines that were connected to a system of gears. There's an artifact called the Hierapolis saw, which is a spectacular Roman artifact that is a water-powered water wheel that is connected to a system of gears via the magic of physics and the gear ratio system, where one turn of the water wheel turns into however many cuts of the saw blade. And it's a giant wooden machine that's connected to a huge metal saw blade that's driven by water, that by the magic of a gear ratio system, you turn the one turn of the water wheel into however many cuts of the saw blade. So I think that they did have machinery like this that was implemented in the cutting process to facilitate, in the vein of work smarter and not harder. You're not out there like breaking your neck with a handsaw. You have machines to do the work. And then even in these Hierapolis saw depictions, there's always a guy pouring something into the saw blade cut. And they were still using those abrasive slurries for the cutting process.
There might be a physics component to that the water abrasion stuff that I don't know if they knew about it or not, but Dr. Gerald Pollack teaches us about easy water. And easy water is water that has an electric charge, which is very different than the water that we think of when we drink all the time. It's like everyone knows water is neutral. No, it's not. When water gets exposed to sunlight, specifically in the infrared frequencies, it separates and develops a charge. Now that charge Dr. Pollack has pointed out is responsible for a whole bunch of different things that otherwise it wouldn't be possible to have happen, like water making it to the tops of trees, against gravity. Easy water allowing our blood to push the blood cells through the extremities of our bodies. So if you add easy water into this sawing capability, not only have you added micro abrasion into the equation, but you've also added charge, which can be very, very, very strong. As we know that when plants can push through cement roadways, and you're like, how the hell does that happen? How does it, photosynthesis and little green fibrous stuff push through cement? Easy water. I think that's going to be a part of the equation. I don't know that, just a speculation.
And so I've also talked about the implementation of obviously chemicals in the stoneworking process. For example, down inside of the Serapeum, this underground tunnel and container system with these huge boxes that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
There are these dimple formations in some of the boxes, and the dimples are very, very smooth. And those dimples were to remove cracks and imperfections in the containers themselves. So my hypothesis about the Serapeum is that they were using ultrasound to create hydrogen out of water, the disassociation of the water molecule into hydrogen using ultrasound. Fantastic episode. Go check out my episode on the function of the Serapeum. So with these ultrasound emanating containers, they wanted to remove any imperfections in the container because they didn't want it to crack when it was operating. So it was important to remove any cracks and imperfections. So you could very easily use, create a little reservoir where a crack was. You pour an acidic solution down inside of that reservoir, let it dissolve away the crack. Then you neutralize the solution with the basic solution. Then you can just remove the water, wipe out all the material, and it would leave you with a perfectly rounded scoop in the top of the lid. So I think that they were also using chemicals in other sort of stoneworking applications. We just got back from a visit to the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, and the archaeological evidence shows that they were using a technique called fire setting.
What's that?
Which, when you're mining, and this is a very well-established mining technique, where you basically set controlled fires on top of the stone. You let it burn, and then you quench it with water. This causes thermal shock in the layer of the material and an effect called thermal spalling, which is fracturing and flaking of the stone. And I just walked around the entire red granite quarry, and you could take these little chips and crumble the granite in your hand. It becomes incredibly fragile and easy to work with this fire setting and thermal spalling application. And there's also archaeological evidence that they were using, instead of water to quench it, that they were possibly using acetic acid or vinegar, or you could use any other acidic solution, pour it on there, and also create a chemical reaction that would chemically degrade the stone. And then you just go in there, remove the material, and it would be a much easier process by using fire, heat, creating the thermal spalling and the cracking in the surface, and then you go in with some tools or some chemicals and process it out and remove the stone.
So you think the Egyptians had the technology to build those pyramids like post-flood?
Well, so I say Egyptians by the virtue of the civilization that was living in Egypt at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the Egyptians. Yeah, whoever that was. I don't really so much get into the who, more so the how in terms of the function of the structures, because the who is still up for a huge debate and speculation. But it does seem like there's an evolution. So part of the reason why I'm interested in the stone circles and these passage chamber reactions, the reactors, passage chamber mound reactors, you want to be able to demonstrate an evolution and development of the technology. Like a point of genesis. Where did they discover it? Okay, so we have some stone circles, and lightning likes to strike these tall things, and it can create this great fertilizer. And then what if we were to try to capture this lightning in a bottle? And that actually is a perfect transition into my next slide deck.
Yay, do it.
Which talks about the implementation of lightning technology and capturing lightning in a bottle by virtue of electric fields. So again, where did this knowledge originally come from? How long did it exist on the planet? Is this from a pre-Younger Dryas, civilization that existed before that possibly had all this knowledge? I mean, of course, I like that idea. It's speculative, but I'm just more interested in the how did these things work, not necessarily who built them and what time period. But it does make a lot of sense that they were operational in terms of the Egyptian pyramids during the time period known as the African humid period, because there was a lot more rain, there was a lot more thunder and lightning storms, there was a lot more rain for the terraforming of the upper Eastern Sahara. More water makes the system work better, especially in terms of the rainfall, the prevalence of lightning, all these sort of things. So I really like that time period. And then around 5300 BC, that's when we see the redesiccation of the Sahara. For some reason, the rain stops, the water recedes, everything turns back into a desert. And that would also give a good explanation for why these things went offline. If it's calibrated to work with a certain amount of water and the water is no longer there and the storms that are driving these systems are no longer as prevalent, you're going to have problems with operating the system. And then you see everybody move back around to the Nile River. So Egyptian civilization pre-8300 was all around the Nile River. Then around 8300 BC, all this rain started happening. The farmlands expanded and the people moved away from the Nile River. Then around 5300, they started to move back. And the beginning of dynastic Egyptian civilization is circa 3500 BC. So it's kind of a sweet spot for the operation of these things for about 3,000 years that they could have been operational, possibly before, possibly a little after. But I really like that time period of about 8,300 to 5,300 BC.
Wow.
That line up with Dr. Robert Schoch's theory on the Sphinx with the water erosion.
How does it line up?
Yeah. I thought he was talking like 12,000 years ago was the last time it was very rainy on the Egyptian peninsula, but it sounds like you're 883.
Yeah, no, the African humid period, there was an abundant amount of rainfall.
Yeah.
And now, so let me throw something else out there. So what if instead of rainfall, you had some sort of disaster on the Giza Plateau, and in one flash flood of an acidic solution, it created all of that erosion in a matter of minutes or hours instead of over hundreds of years?
I agree. I agree, man. Or Jeff, I think you got it. Yep, I agree.
Oh wow!
And there's lots of evidence that something happened on the Giza Plateau that created significant acidic erosion in areas where there really shouldn't be any. So, again, maybe a small earthquake or, again, who knows what happened that would have ruptured some of the subterranean systems. And all of a sudden you've got a leak of acid running down the Giza Plateau where usually it would run through a controlled distribution system. Perhaps it was running on the top of the Giza Plateau and spilled over down into the Sphinx enclosure to create those vertical erosion patterns.
That is fascinating.
Right. All right. Finish with your lightning and magnetic stones.
Okay, yeah. So this is actually an episode that talks about electric field chemistry and the implementation of electric fields in facilitating chemical reactions, mentioning both the function of the Great Pyramid and also the production of ammonia inside the Red Pyramid, which this is one of my greatest research revelations, is that by implementing electric fields, you can actually significantly lower the operating temperature for the production of ammonia molecules.
Wow.
Low temperature ammonia synthesis. And I'll get to a huge sort of culminating moment here in just a second. So we were talking about Oshido Ishi Hill at the beginning of the conversation. This is one of those magnetite stones. Andesite stones that's permeated with magnetite. And you can see all the pockmarks and scarring all over the stone. And if I were to stand next to this thing, I'd be about halfway up on this stone.
Oh, wow. So it's big.
So this stone is popping out of the top of this flattened volcanic tough hillside. And there's sort of a rough circular formation of these andesite stones protruding out of the top of the hill. And the professors of Kumamoto University, this is located in Kumamoto, they've studied this site and they've come to the conclusion that all of the scarring features on the stone are a result of recurring electrical discharge from lightning hitting this stone, which left remnant magnetization of the magnetite. And we tested the magnetic field, and this thing is just like radiating with magnetic field, where the ambient magnetic field on the hill is approximately 40 microtesla. But if you go up close to the stone, I mean, it has fluctuations from like 400 to 1500 microtesla. So it's got a huge magnetic field that is a remnant permanent magnetic field resulting in the permanent fixation of the magnet within the magnetite. So my hypothesis is that this Neolithic civilization was studying structures like this, noticing that these stones were getting struck by lightning. The lightning would bring rain, and the rain would do miracles for the agricultural areas surrounding these things. So they were, again, hey, why don't we replicate this natural formation of stone and create our own artificial stone circles? And that's exactly what the Jomon civilization did with the artificially leveled plateau and the stone circle at Kamakino, where they were bringing atmospheric fertilizers to agricultural areas. So then let's move into the Egyptian pyramids. So again, I was just talking about the origin and development of the technology and the progression. So you have the stone circle systems, and then they started building these passage chamber reactors that were sort of capturing these chemical reactions and putting it inside of a chamber. So again, conventional timeline, these passage chambers came before the Egyptian pyramids. So we see sort of a progression from where we have things happening in the atmosphere. Well, now what if we were to take what was happening in the atmosphere and put it inside of a chamber? That is the genesis of the technology that was implemented in the Red Pyramid. So this is the Red Pyramid that produced an aqueous solution of ammonia. This is the Bent Pyramid that converted that aqueous ammonia solution into solid ammonium bicarbonate by percolating carbon dioxide up through the ammonia solution. Just so happens that that carbon dioxide was a byproduct of the actual ammonia synthesis process. So you utilize that byproduct to create your secondary chemical. I've also proposed that the Bent Pyramid could have been producing nitric acid. Then we move on to the Giza Plateau with sulfuric acid and hydrochloric acid inside the Great Pyramid and Central Pyramid. So there was a fantastic study that came out a while ago that revealed that the Great Pyramid of Giza can focus electromagnetic energy. Both magnetic fields and electric fields are concentrated around areas inside of the Great Pyramid. So they did this in a software called COMSOL Multiphysics Modeling Software, where they took radio frequency signals and did it from both vectors, from below and from above. And what they found, this slide is looking at the concentration of electric fields. They also tested the concentration of magnetic fields. So you'll see here that there is a significant concentration of electric field in the area surrounding the King's Chamber. And they tested different wavelengths of electromagnetic energy. So again, here you can see the Great Pyramid and the concentration of electric fields in the area surrounding the Great Pyramid, King's Chamber, and Antechamber. So the King's Chamber and the Antechamber are made out of red granite, which has a ton of quartz content. Right. So we have an electric field inside an area made of red granite. That is going to induce an electric field in the red granite that is going to create the inverse piezoelectric property from the quartz. That's exactly how an ultrasound transducer works, is you input electric current and induce an electric field inside a piece of quartz. That produces micro vibrations in the quartz that create ultrasound.
It's a mixer. They made a mixer, essentially.
Right.
I mean, that's a very
capturing lightning in a bottle by using dielectrics. And this is a field of chemistry called electric field chemistry, where you can utilize these electric fields for various applications to facilitate chemical reactions. So this is just, several research papers talking about how electric fields can facilitate chemical reactions, basically providing a catalyst where instead of using a metal substrate catalyst, you utilize the electric field to act as the catalyst. Okay, so going in the Great Pyramid, the inverse piezoelectric effect is when electrical current is applied to a crystal, the quartz crystal vibrates, and it produces ultrasound. So when the quartz crystal is subjected to an electric field, acoustic vibrations are created called the inverse piezoelectric effect. This is exactly what was happening inside of the red granite antechamber inside of the Great Pyramid. So the study revealed that the Great Pyramid concentrates these electric fields in the area surrounding these red granite components. These are dielectric materials that have the capacity for storing electric fields. That's the definition of a dielectric. And stones are dielectrics. Limestone is a dielectric. Red granite is a dielectric with a constant of about 6 or 7. So these red granite components store this electric field inside of the stone. The electric field activates the inverse piezoelectric effect within the quartz, causing micro vibrations of the quartz, producing ultrasound. So we talked about the production, or the supply of hydrogen sulfide gas from these hydrothermal vents below the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. So we have a natural supply of sulfur gas coming into the furnace chamber, otherwise known as chamber. I won't go into mechanisms. Let's just focus on this area here, because we're talking about the conversion of sulfur dioxide into sulfur trioxide inside of the antechamber. So the sulfur dioxides and oxygen from the air shafts are drawn through the antechamber by lowering the water level. It's far more complicated than I'm going to describe right here. The first step is the subterranean chamber, which pumps water into the upper components. Once you've filled the grand gallery with water, if you lower the water in the grand gallery, it will pull air through the air shafts into the king's chamber. It's like a plunger mechanism. By draining the water in the grand gallery, you're pulling air into the air shafts and pulling the flow of gases through the antechamber. So that's what's happening in here in a very brief description, is the gases are flowing through the antechamber. You have ultrasound waves within this, and the vibrations in this area. If you go in there, it is made to amplify sound. This area specifically, if you just talk, your voice reverberates in this cavity. Like, it's absolutely staggering to stand in the antechamber. So within the grand gallery, we also have acoustic cavitation catalyzed reactions, where there's a piece of red granite here that's known as the plug block, and then you have ultrasound coming from the antechamber area, where there's a series of chemical reactions that occur here. So you have sulfur dioxide and water. Sulfur dioxide will dissolve into water to produce an intermediary called sulfurous acid. Sulfurous acid will then be oxidized by the air to produce dilute sulfuric acid. The sulfur trioxide will also then dissolve more easily into the dilute solution of furic acid. So there's several intermediary chemical reactions that are involved in this process, producing both sulfurous and sulfuric acid. Acoustic cavitation catalyzed oxidation reaction. Okay, so that's how the electric fields from lightning are utilized within the Great Pyramid to facilitate the chemical reactions. And I have a full playlist on my channel describing in depth all of these individual chambers and mechanisms of operation. This is a super brief overview.
Right.
Okay, so now on to the Red Pyramid.
Right. I just wanted to make...
Yeah, go ahead.
For those of us whose heads are spinning, realize that Jeff does like he said, has a playlist that details this, and so you don't have to go through it at Mach 3 like what we're doing. He steps it out and gives it in very, very digestible form. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now, don't worry. Go back and read the playlist. Go back and watch the playlist. So go ahead.
Yes. And so I've had, after my many podcast appearances, I've had comments and contact from chemists that work in sonochemistry, exactly the processes that I've just described. And one guy said, I'm a chemist that works in the field of sonochemistry, and this resonates with me. so this is again, I go into great depth presenting scholastic academic research papers that corroborate all of these mechanisms of operation to establish a scientifically verifiable process that justifies what I have proposed being implemented within the process within the Great Pyramid. All right, so now on to the Red Pyramid and the production of ammonia. Again, capturing lightning in a bottle, we were talking about taking this atmospheric fertilizer, atmospheric nitrate fixation reaction, and capturing it within a chamber system so that you could more controllably produce this aqueous ammonia solution. So I would propose that in like manner as the Great Pyramid, King's Chamber and antechamber areas being able to create these electric fields, I bet if they ran the same experiment on the configuration of the Red Pyramid, they would find concentration of electric field around the final synthesis chamber. And it just so happens that I recently stumbled across several papers talking about the roles of electric field in low temperature ammonia synthesis. That by using an electric field in the chemical reactor, you are able to synthesize ammonia at much lower temperatures.
Wow.
It just so happens that in these reactors, they are using a strontium-based catalyst.
Really?
You can see here that this is a strontium-based metal catalyst. And by inducing the reactor, they're able to synthesize the final ammonia molecule at much lower temperatures.
Oh,
So it happens. What did we find in the chemical analysis of the Red Pyramid? We've also already talked about zinc and antimony, but the big drum roll is
Say it.
strontium.
Boom!
wow.
And hey, kids, when
And
you burn
the
strontium,
first
what color
time-
does it? Oh, sorry. When you burn
So
strontium,
when
what color
I was
is it?
originally, yeah.
Right.
So when I was originally reviewing this data,
Red
the
Pyramid.
greatest concentration of metal found in these samples was iron. The second greatest concentration was strontium. And I still hadn't made the connection of what was the function of this strontium. Strontium can naturally occur in limestone as well as iron. Specifically, the limestone used in the construction of the Red Pyramid it's very, very high iron oxide content limestone. They know that geologically speaking. But the strontium always it threw me for a loop, but I didn't really understand it until it kept researching. And then I stumble across the article talking about the strontium-based catalyst and this electric field facilitated low temperature ammonia synthesis reaction. But that's not the only academic article that talks about electric field synthesis. So you see in this sample here, we have about 58% concentration of iron. And here in our micro element composition, strontium was basically 400 times greater concentration than all of the other metals that we discovered.
Wow.
And you can see here, there's a whole bunch of trace elements that we discovered in these samples. There's lead, thorium, uranium, neodymium. I mean, you name it, it's been discovered in these samples. But strontium coming in at about like 400 times concentration than anything else in the samples. And this is the Second paper, electromagnetic field enables ammonia synthesis at low temperature, where they found that by implementing these electric fields in the ammonia synthesis reaction, they were able to reduce the onset temperature from approximately 300 degrees C in the conventional Haber process to 100 degrees C. So you're able to significantly change the reaction dynamics of synthesizing ammonia. And my hypothesis is that they were, so in the modern Haber-Bosch process, we make liquid ammonia. So we create this very high temperature ammonia synthesis reaction that occurs over an iron catalyst. And then they take that gaseous ammonia and they cool it into liquid ammonia. I don't think they had the capability to supercool the gases inside of the pyramids, but instead we're producing an aqueous solution of ammonia where the ammonia gas was dissolved into water, which actually is much more favorable at lower temperatures.
Right.
To create an ideal container to dissolve gases, you want the pressure to be high and the temperature to be low. And that is exactly why the red pyramid is configured with a tiered upper vault. Because as you raise the water level in the red pyramid, the pressure in the upper part of the container is going to be much higher. So the red pyramid is literally designed for the compression of gases to increase the pressure to dissolve that gaseous ammonia, which actually it encourages the forward momentum of the reaction process.
Right.
By dissolving the product into water, you're removing it from the reactors. It actually encourages the whole reaction moving forward by immediately dissolving it, and then you drain it out of the bottom of the chamber.
I love that video when you described that. I don't remember which one it was, but I remember watching that and going, holy crap, the simplicity of that is just elegant, beautiful. You know,
and it's been a very, very wild ride. And again, if please contact Andy and give him my great, most sincere thanks, because his comment and his video and his just, I was so overwhelmed with gratitude when I got that shout out by Andrew Hall. I mean, it's the expertise that he has in this industry. Again, I can't say enough how grateful I am that he even knew about my work, let alone thought so highly of it to do such an eloquent and thorough video and blog post on it. I was really, really honored. And it's been one of the most tremendous single pieces of recognition. Again, we were talking, Ben, earlier about, people in the comments say this, that, and the other, but none of these people are qualified. They have no academic or professional qualifications. But behind the scenes is where I've really gotten the most recognition. And before I published any of this material or before I published my book, I worked with a chemical engineer and a master's level professor in he's a master's level chemistry professor to vet my work. And he literally said during our many, many Zoom meetings, he said, I'm going to treat you like a master's level student, and this will be your dissertation. Like you were one of my students. And he literally tore the thing to pieces and had me build it back step by step, and in-depth explanation of every single little mechanism of operation, every driving factor, every component that was involved in the construction, the chemical reactions, etc. And at the end of the day, he said that it was the most scientifically verifiable theory that he had ever heard for the function of the Egyptian pyramids. And again, I take it as a compliment when people say that this is mundane and practical. It's not meant to be. I mean, for me, it's fascinating and it's spectacular and it's exciting. But many people, even including Andy, he said that, this is probably the most mundane explanation for the pyramids, but it's the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah, it really
does. It contributed to the benefit. It contributed to the benefit of the society at large. These are massive infrastructure projects, and the ends have to justify the means. Whatever they were doing with these things had to be so important to their civilization at large that it would justify all of the manpower and, not that they were using money in a conventional sense, but all the money and investment in these structures. It had to be for something really, really important. And a lot of people don't understand that the driving force of our modern civilization is chemicals. It is 100% due to the manufacturing of chemicals on an industrial scale that we had the modern industrial revolution. And it started with ammonia and the process. And I've also talked in my work how the original apparatus for the Haber process literally looks exactly like the configuration of the Red Pyramid.
Yes, that is so cool. If people need to go back and watch.
It's literally a small scale model.
Which video was that?
It uses
which
so
video?
it's in my Red Pyramid
Okay.
I have so many of these. Actually, hold on one sec. I can find it.
Because it's you want to drill down.
That would be a great slide to end on here. Here we go. So
this.
So let me show you the staining.
I love this.
Yeah, so here's a picture from inside of the Red Pyramid.
Yeah.
So you can see some of and we've actually done experiment that model these flow patterns that we see. This is from the fill process. When they were filling this chamber with water, it created these patterns on the lower part of the chamber, and we've actually experimentally modeled this process. And this is the staining that's all over the inside of the Red Pyramid. And here is a comparison the 3-chamber configuration of the Red Pyramid here on the right with 3 chambers connected by a series of shafts. And over here on the left is the configuration of the first apparatus developed by Fritz Haber that eventually became the Haber process.
Holy crap.
And you can see that, so this third final synthesis chamber is higher than these two are at ground level. And then this one is up here. And he actually went so far as to do the exact same thing in his model, where this thing doesn't have to be on a stand up in the air. It could be easily at the exact same level and the reaction would happen at the exact same. But he went through the effort of, raising this chamber up into the air here because that's the exact same configuration. And it just so happens that old Fritz Haber used to travel extensively to Egypt. And his ammonia synthesis apparatus process was financed by an Egyptian bank company. An Egyptian financier provided the bankroll for his whole original operation for producing ammonia.
Oh, wow, that opens up.
And again, oh yeah, I mean it's total conspiracy theory type stuff. But, the first time I saw that comparison, I was like, "You got to be kidding me!"
You got to be kidding me.
But again, our modern industrial civilization, it's all predicated upon our ability to produce fertilizer. That's what led to the expansion of population in the modern time, was because we could produce fertilizer on an industrial scale and feed more people. The more people you can feed, the more people that can work. Now you have giant machines to make chemicals. They often say that a civilization's level of the level of sophistication of any civilization is predicated upon their production of sulfuric acid. It's one of the big indicators of the level of development of any particular civilization. So sulfuric acid is also a ubiquitously useful industrial chemical that sort of defines the development of our modern industries.
Wow.
That is so awesome. Geoffrey Drumm, this has been absolutely fascinating, captivating. We have to do this again, but we're going to let you go for today. But wow, Matt, closing words?
Yeah, I got to say, I went into this like real skeptical, because I really wanted to believe the giant electric plant thing, but holy crap, I'm convinced, man. I think you figured out the pyramids.
I think you figured out the pyramids.
I really appreciate that. I've basically, dedicated my life and the past, at least a decade of all of my time has gone into very, very carefully developing these ideas. And, again, before I published my book or before I did YouTube channel, I made sure to vet all of this, the accuracy of the chemical reaction standpoint. And I had a lot of people look at this work before I published it, and they said, believed in it so much that they let me put, Ed Elton, his name is in the acknowledgments of my first book, because he really, really believed in what I was doing. And again, Andrew, if you're watching this, if you guys can please reach out to him, invite him to Egypt. I would love to host the whole Thunderbolts project crew. Come. Oh, that would be amazing content. Imagine what we could do.
Amazing.
Imagine.
And that's the objective is.
Yeah. And I think that your theory here is so hard to deny that I think you are going to be the gateway for a lot of people to Andy Hall. And that's going to open up the electric universe in a big way. You're one of the giants,
never expected.
Man. This is incredible.
I never expected the synergy between these two ideas, and I was certainly never working toward that. The electric universe theory is just something that I believe intrinsically. It's something that, again, resonates with me, and it's something that I always as soon as I started learning about it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the truth. And this is how I always believe that the universe and solar system operate. It's an interconnected electromagnetic system. Everything is connected. Everything works in synergy.
That's how you know it's a theory of everything. When everybody working in separate fields is coming to the same conclusions with the same processes, you've got a working theory of everything.
I will absolutely.
And again,
I'll absolutely pass along your thoughts and ideas to Andy, and expect that we're all going to do this together again.
Yeah, we should get both these guys.
I would very, very much enjoy that.
In fact, let's do that. Let's pencil that in for the next time that we get together. There'll be a fourth box, and Andy Hall will be in that box.
That'd be great. I'd love to watch those two pass ideas.
There's a lot more to discuss. I mean, this is literally just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I've done podcasts that have been 6 hours long, and it's barely scratching the surface. If anyone wants to check out my YouTube channel, I think I'm at 200 research episodes and 100 on-site expeditions.
Wow.
So we into these apply probably more times than anyone else in the industry. All of my content from Japan, Ireland, the UK, all of our on-site footage is available on my YouTube channel. If anyone wants to pick up a copy of the book or grab some Land of Chem merch, it's thelandofchem.com. I'm the Land of Chem, CHEM, on all socials and also on YouTube. And if you're interested in coming to Egypt to see this stuff for yourself, send me an email, contact@thelandofchem.com with the subject line 2025 Egypt Tour. I'll send you the full tour itinerary and pricing details. And guys, thank you so much for having me on. That was a lot of fun.
Geoffrey Drumm, that was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Talk to you later. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening to the Brainstorm with Sparks and Finn. Hope you learned something new or found some food for thought. Join us next time as we explore this amazing electric universe. Cheers!